gamers? Power Heal here, and today we're going to talk about Patchwork and Classic Naxxramas. So we already talked a bit about Patchwork in one of my previous videos, the one that we did for the Abomination / Construct Wing. This is about 2 weeks ago prior to Naxx launching, and I think I did a pretty good job talking about Patch in that video, but I figured it'd be a good idea to drop another video because I've been seeing people struggle on him recently, and I think he just deserves his own dedicated video. The mechanics are relatively straightforward, but there are some nuances in the fight where if you understand everything at a very fundamental level, I think it becomes an incredibly easy fight. Whereas if you just kind of understand enough to get by, you may be prone to some more inefficiencies during the fight. So I'm going to do my best to make it super clear. I'm going to give you the strategy that I would prefer to use if, I'm just bringing a guild through Naxx for the first time and I want to keep things incredibly simple. And this is a fight that, it's often kind of seen as intimidating for healers, right? It's like, oh, it's the healer fight. Patch hits super hard. I hope your healers are good for Patch. And it's really an easy fight. In fact, if you do the fight properly, it's one of the easiest fights to heal in the entire game. So, yeah, it's built up to be this big thing, but it's really not that bad, and we'll take you through it in this video. And we're going to do a video on Resuvius as well, and for a very similar reason. This is a priest channel. It should probably have a Resuvius mind control video after all, a video that's dedicated explicitly to that. Because even though that is, in principle, another simple fight, just mind control, LOL, how you do it obviously matters, and there's definitely some things people could take to heart that will probably prevent a wipe or two for their guild. So I'll be doing Resuvius after this, and I think it's important to do both of those bosses because they actually gatekeep a lot of loot in this raid. So being able to kill them is very important because if you can kill Patchwork, you can kill everything else in the Abomination / Construct Wing. And if you can kill Resuvius, the rest of the Death Knight Wing outside of 4 Horsemen is free. So that's a lot of loot that you're basically able to get. It's like 7 bosses worth of loot if you can kill Patchwork and Resuvius. And the thing you want to keep in mind is if you're a guild that didn't one-shot everything right away, which is probably the case if you're watching this video, and you're working your way towards that Saffron and KT kill, killing as many bosses per week is huge because you're just going to get that much more loot. Think about it like this: if you kill 5 to 8 bosses every week, and then you go try and attempt KT and Saffron, it's going to be a lot easier if you killed 10 to 13 every week leading up. So we're going to try and get Patchwork down for you, and then we'll move on to Raz, and we'll maybe cover some of the harder bosses. You guys can leave suggestions in the comments. Now, before we get into Patchwork, just a little bit about the background footage. I'm just doing some farming in the PvP zone here in New World. This has nothing to do with the encounter, so, just some background footage for the video. Since Patchwork is a case where we're not really going to talk about the positioning or anything like that, I don't really have to bring out the whiteboard. You will not see this gameplay in the Resuvius video, obviously, because that's a hyper-positioning-oriented fight. But yeah, just sit back, relax, and we'll get you through Patchwork. And if you guys are interested in any amount of New World content, just feel free to leave it in the comments, and I'll maybe do a couple more videos on New World. It's not going to interrupt the WoW videos, so don't worry about that. It's still going to primarily be a WoW channel. I'm just getting back into this a little bit and doing a bit of farming. So I figured I'd kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Alright, so what is Patchwork? What type of fight is it? Now, we mentioned it's a bit of a healer fight. Some people would characterize it as a DPS race because back in, Vanilla Classic, it kind of was considered that because people weren't really that great at the game. Raid compositions were a lot worse. People had way less gear. People didn't consume as much. People didn't use world buffs. So hitting the Enrage was actually a thing. Personally, I've never actually hit the Enrage on Patchwork, and that's even doing it without world buffs, etc. So in my opinion, it's probably going to be fine for you guys as well, and you probably won't hit the Enrage either unless something weird happens, like you lose a bunch of your raid in some weird case. But even that is not usual because normally it's kind of like all or nothing. Like the fight is either going well or you're dying. It's kind of binary. So yeah, you're probably not going to wipe to the enrage, as long as you have a relatively decent comp, decent gear, and decent players. However, killing the boss faster is always better because there is sort of a soft enrage mechanic, which is healer mana. So healer mana normally isn't a problem on this fight, but if you start stacking certain things against you, like you don't have world buffs, people aren't full consuming, things of that nature, maybe somebody pulled threat and took a hateful strike and died. When these things start coming together and adding up, obviously they can really stretch your healers thin on mana because the fight just lasts longer. So you definitely want to be consuming as much as possible. This is a fight where I would even break out things like the fire water on. I'm notoriously stingy on my rogue in pug runs in particular, but if I was in a pug, I would use fire water on this boss in particular. Just to give an example for reference, like maybe I wouldn't use it on Noth, right? Really, really easy fight, but on something like Patchwork, I would definitely bring it out. You want to have world buffs if you can. This boss, if you're close to killing the boss and it had killed you previously and took your world buffs, you may want to consider actually going and getting another Onyxia or potentially getting a ZG, just something you can easily drop that you have control of, that you can kind of drop, get out, port people back, etc. Because things like that can make the difference on this fight. Now, in terms of tank consumes, you're definitely going to want to use your armor pots. You're going to want to have your Flask of the Titans, and you really need stone shields if you are either the person main tanking Patchwork or one of the potentially 3 hateful tanks on the boss. So if you're off tanking, you definitely want stone shields. If you're main tanking, you definitely want stone shields. For healers, obviously Mana Flask is nice if you can afford it. If not, then Dark Runes and Mana Potions go a long way on this fight. They help you kind of bridge the gap. I would say that if you have a Mana Potion and a Dark Rune, just one single Mana Potion, one single Dark Rune, you're probably going to be just fine on this fight in terms of mana, unless something catastrophically goes wrong. But honestly, the boss would probably enrage before you went at that point. So that's kind of like the intro to the boss. And let's talk about the ability. So we're going to break it down into 2 kind of components, right? The first component is the tank, the main tank, and how that's going to work. And then we're going to talk about the hatefuls. So the main tank, it's basically just you get aggro on the boss. You want to be number 1 threat, primary threat. And it's basically just very tank and spank with a boss that does a lot of damage. Now, Patchwork in particular is a little bit different from some of the other harder hitting bosses where he hits quite fast while still hitting hard. If you do a fight like Twin Emperors or Broodlord, you'll notice that he tends not to hit that fast, but they do hit hard. The thing that counterbalances this is the fact that he doesn't really do a special strike on the main tank. The Hateful Strike mechanic that we'll talk about in a moment is exclusively for the off tanks, so you don't have to worry about something like a big unbalancing strike or an Immortal Strike, which in my opinion makes the fight really easy to heal, especially from even a main tank perspective. Like, you basically toss 3 to 4 healers on the main tank, and maybe you have some people casting Flash, you have some people casting Greater Heal, and you're basically kind of cancel casting. And you'll get into a rhythm and you'll understand what's going on, and it should be very easy to heal. This is not a fight where you're going to have main tank deaths a lot of the time, or it shouldn't be at least. To give you a point of reference, if you've ever done Algalon in Wrath of the Lich King when it was current, then that fight was actually a fight where even if you're doing everything right as a healer, the boss actually just does so much damage and was so overtuned, especially for the gear you had at the time, he could actually kill your tank, even when, like I said, you're basically doing all the right things. That's not going to be the case for Patchwork. As long as your tank is adequately geared, as well as, the healers healing them the right way, then you shouldn't really have your main tank dying on Patchwork. So if that is happening, you definitely need to revisit that. Speaking of that, a couple causes of that could be that he might need to wear a bit more mitigation gear. For the tank, a mix of mitigation and avoidance is usually fine. But for the hateful tanks, which we'll talk about in a moment, you pretty much want purely mitigation. And we'll explain why that is pretty much right now. We'll hop into the Hateful Strike mechanic. So how Hateful Strike works is it's basically a strike that the boss does on the off tanks, and it hits insanely hard. It basically hits for like 8k, but that 8k is counting in a geared tank. So this is a tank that's built for mitigation for the Patchwork fight. If it hits a DPS warrior because he overtakes a tank spot on the threat list, he will most likely just insta-pop. So you really don't want that to happen. You really need to be staying under your Hateful tanks if you are a DPS. Now the exception to this is if you are a ranged player, because ranged is not affected by the Hateful strike. So if you're a ranged player, you can pump to your heart's content as long as you don't overtake the main tank. And please don't do that, because that would be a catastrophe. But as long as you don't do that, you're fine. So for the off tanks on Patchwork, the ones that are taking the Hateful, like I said, you want mitigation, because the only thing you're trying to do is survive the Hateful. You're going to have plenty of time to get healed back up, especially with the strategy that I'm going to talk about. So really, you just need to survive that initial hit, and then the healers will get you back up. If you're dying to Hatefuls, like getting actually one-shot, then that is absolutely a gearing problem, and you need to wear more mitigation gear. There's basically no way around that, because there's no other way to do the fight, essentially. It is, just about raw mitigation at that point if you're dying to that. So, how do the Hatefuls work, right? I'm going to talk about the 3 rules for Hatefuls, and if you guys understand these, then you will, be able to do the fight very easily, and you'll have a great understanding of what's going on a fundamental level and why I'm telling you to do what you're doing. And then it's going to be a lot easier, because it's always better when you know why, right? That's what this whole channel was kind of founded on. So, the first rule of Hateful Strike is Hateful will only target players within melee range. We already went over this. This is why ranged players don't have to worry about, pulling threat outside of pulling threat off of the main tank. Then the second rule of Hateful will only target players between 2nd, 3rd, 4th on the threat. The way I like to look at this is there's like a threat box on Patchwork of your top 4 players. Your first one's going to be your main tank, and the other 3 are going to be potential candidates for a Hateful Strike. And I say potential because we're going to find out why that is in a moment. And the third rule is Hateful will only target the player with the most health. Now this is of those off-tank players, right? So basically those rules combine together, where it has to be a player that's in the, the top 3 remaining places of threat after the main tank, and then out of those players, the highest HP player. This is why you actually see people go into the slime on Patchwork to lower their HP before the pull, and the reason why they do this as melee is because they are trying to make it sure that if they happen to pull threat, not pull threat, but if they get into that that 4th threat box where it's the main tank and then the 3 potential off tanks, that they are not targeted by the Hateful because their HP is low. So what the slime does is it basically reduces your HP to like half, I think it is, and that's obviously huge because it'll pretty much make sure that they won't be a Hateful target if they do accidentally pull threat. So that's worth doing for sure. It's not very common that that'll actually save people, I would say, but it definitely can. So it's definitely worth doing. There's no reason not to do it, essentially, right? And don't heal those people up as well. It's going to be tempting, right? Obviously, if you're trying to parse or something like that, maybe people will allow you to heal them in that circumstance, but if you're just trying to progress through the fight, don't heal the people that went into the slime. Just focus on the main tank and the off tank. And basically, how we're going to manipulate this fight is the third rule. So keep that one in mind. Hateful Strike will only target the player with the most health. So what we can do there is we can use this to our advantage to make a very consistent pattern on who's getting hit. And you start that off by, adjusting your tank's HP. So you can even have like a tank that's like the first Hateful tank, right? The tank with the highest HP that's not the main tank that's in that top 4 threat. And then you would have you have a second off tank which has a little bit less HP than that tank. And that's going to be the second target of Hateful. Now, remember, Hateful we're talking about not absolute HP, but current HP. This means that in order for any strategy to work where he's Hatefuling a different person, you can't heal the original person too fast. There's actually a strategy on Patchwork where you basically have 3 or 4 healers on the main tank, and then the rest of the healers are on one off tank. And the idea is you spam that off tank as he's taking damage. Like, heals are already coming in, so there's heals staggered coming into him. And the idea is that he basically instantly goes back to full HP before the next Hateful. The interval on Hateful, by the way, is about 1.5 seconds. So he would get hit with a Hateful, this is the off tank, and then he would get bombed with heals to get to full HP before the next Hateful, and then he gets Hateful again, and that'll basically continue for the entire fight. That's like a really advanced strategy you can do on the fight. Now, I would not recommend that because it basically risks you not getting his HP quite full in time, right? So maybe because it's a 1.5 second window, you don't quite get him to full, and then he's not all the way full for when the Hateful Strike comes in, and then that kills him. So that's like a very advanced strategy people use. I would not recommend you do that at all. Instead, what I would recommend you do is to count on having essentially 2 Hateful tanks and then 1 main tank. And how this is going to work is your main tank is doing what we talked about before, right? He's keeping threat, just dealing with the normal damage. Then off tank 1 is getting hit with a Hateful, and then 1.5 seconds later, off tank 2 is getting hit with a Hateful. Okay, that means that it's going to take another 1.5 seconds before the Hateful returns to off tank 1. So you actually have 3 seconds to heal off tank 1 to full health. Now, if you don't heal off tank 1 to full health, he doesn't die because, remember, Hateful targets the top 3 people who aren't the main tank, right? So what it would actually do is it would go to the 4th eligible person for a Hateful and hit him, and then it would go back to off tank 1. But if you heal off tank 1 back quick enough, it'll just go from off tank 2 to off tank 1. So how I do it is we have, like I said, main tank just doing his thing, taking damage. We have off tank 1, he takes 1 Hateful Strike, okay? He gets brought down to like 80% HP. 1.5 second pass, then tank 2 gets a Hateful Strike, okay? Then, before the next Hateful Strike lands, your heals are going to land because even greater heal is 2.5 seconds, okay? So you should easily be able to cast a greater heal in the period between those Hateful Strikes. So all you have to do is make sure that the people healing off tank 1 get him to 100% before the Hateful comes back to him. And that's really easy. Why is that easy? Because if you use the greater heal type spells, right? So either greater heal or healing wave or holy light on paladin, it's very easy to have 3 healers on a tank like that, like off tank 1, or even 4 healers, and you have them all use a spell that hits for like minimum 2k healing, I would say, is a pretty good way to do it. You want to have like probably 4 healers. So let's say you have 12 healers in total. A good way to split it up would be 4 on the main tank, 4 on off tank 1, and 4 on off tank 2. And the 4 on off tank 1 are just doing their normal thing, healing like normal. And then the 4 on off tank 1 and 2, they're going to be casting greater heal or healing wave or holy light as soon as their tank takes damage. The moment he takes damage, you press the heal button. Because remember, it's going to take 3 seconds for that tank to get hit again, and your heal is a 2.5 second cast. So your heal is always going to land before the Hateful has a chance to come back around, essentially. And if there's 4 of you, and you're each casting a 2k heal, right, it's probably going to be a little bit over 2k. You're going to go, easy 8 to 9k healing, especially because most likely somebody's going to crit. You guys all have world buffs. You're going to be just fine. On my priest, to give you a reference of what a 2k heal looks like, for me that would be greater heal rank 2. I think that's going to be the case for quite a few priests, but you can test your greater heal or your healing wave or your holy light out to see which one kind of matches that 2k threshold. And then obviously, if for some reason you had less healers, like let's say you only had 9 healers in a run, you're never going to have that, but let's just imagine. You would probably have 3 on the main tank, 3 on off tank 1, and 3 on off tank 2, and then you would need to put a little bit more HP back per healer, so maybe you're doing 2.5k heal per player, which on my priest would look like greater heal 3 or greater heal 4. So all you have to do is basically figure out how much healing you need. And once you figure out how much healing you need, you know how many healers you have on that target. And it's a very, very simple fight. But like I said, you're pretty much always going to have at least 12 healers. And if you have at least 12 healers, the fight is super easy. Because 4 on the main tank, 4 on the off tank, 1, 4 on the off tank, 2. And it's very easy to sustain like a greater heal rank 2 if you're only pressing it when the damage comes out. Don't get in your head. Don't spam it, right? Wait for the damage, press the button. Wait for the damage, press the button. Wait for the damage, press the button. It's that simple. It's so easy. And, just mana potion as soon as you're able, dark rune as soon as you're able to try and get the most out of them. But if you do that, that's the only thing you have to do all fight. It's kind of boring. It doesn't feel good, particularly. It's not a fun fight to heal, but it's definitely really easy, and there's no easier way to do it than that. Any other strategy, you don't have to do the strategy. You can just kind of like wing it. You can flash heal and stuff, because as long as you get that tank healed before the next Hateful comes in on them, you're fine. But it's going to waste some mana, right? The way I'm talking about here is basically all pre-calculated out before, because your tank is probably going to have like around 9 or 10k health, and he's probably going to get hit for around 8k. So if you can put 8k back, and remember, if you heal with a heal, I'm saying around 2k, it's probably going to be a little more than that. So realistically, when you count a little bit extra, the crits, etc., you're going to do about 8.5 to 9k healing on that target. He's absolutely going to be full by the time the next Hateful Strike comes in. Now, you can obviously add another tank to the mix, like I said. You can have your first tank get Hatefuled, then your second tank get Hatefuled. Then if your first tank is not, above your third tank in terms of health, your third tank will get Hatefuled. This will give you even more time to heal the first tank. So if for some reason you guys are struggling, like if maybe just, like honestly, if you had like a raid where you had people who were really, really slow and they couldn't react in time for that, to press the button as soon as somebody takes damage, you could potentially do something like that, okay? And that would give you an even bigger buffer. You'd have 4.5 seconds to get tank 1 healed. So you can add more tanks into the equation, but typically 2 off tanks is the sweet spot, because 1 off tank is just really stressful, right? And then typically guilds don't have 3 off tanks, or they don't have 3 off tanks at the appropriate gear level, or they don't have 3 that really feel comfortable fighting for threat, or they don't have 3 that are geared enough to take the Hateful damage. So, banking on having 2 really well-geared off tanks for mitigation makes sense. You have your main tank who's got a good mix of mitigation, a good mix of avoidance, and you will be absolutely fine in this fight. If you have any other questions or anything like that, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I will try to get back to you there. But like I said, super foolproof strategy. Just do the 2 off tank strategy, and as soon as that Hateful Strike comes out, just cast your 2.5 second heal. Like I said, probably rank 2 or rank 3, and most likely it's going to be rank 2 if you have 4 healers on that target. And then you don't spam it, don't do anything, just then wait again, hit it again, and just again until the fight's over, and you'll clear this fight easily. If you do that, the fight is basically going to be on your DPS and tanks to not mess up the aggro, and you guys will never drop a tank to a hateful death or anything of that sort. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed the background footage, and I'll be back next time to talk to you guys about Resuvius. So I will see you guys then.